On June 23, 1942, observers for the Royal Air Force at Pembrey Airfield in South Wales peered through binoculars at a streamlined German fighter aircraft emerging from the clouds, positioning itself for a landing. Warning sirens ought to have been blaring. Anti-aircraft batteries ought to have been locking onto the hostile plane, yet something in the pilot's approach felt amiss. The Focke-Wulf 190 landed gently on the grass airstrip, coasting to a halt close to the control tower. Its engine sputtered silent. The cockpit canopy retracted. Then, Oberleutnant Armin Faber from Jagdgeschwader the Sau emerged from his cockpit, removed his leather flight helmet, and surveyed the strange structures around him. A moment later, a chill ran down his spine. The planes parked on the tarmac were not Messerschmitts. They were Spitfires. The men sprinting his way wore Royal Air Force blue, not Luftwaffe gray. The dawning comprehension that struck Faber at that instant was mirrored by British intelligence agents all over southern England. The Reich's deadliest fighter plane, the machine responsible for killing Allied pilots for months, the enigmatic new weapon that appeared unbeatable in battle, had just been handed over, undamaged, to Great Britain by a pilot who became lost and believed he was landing in France. The value of this intelligence was immense. However, the findings of American test pilots, once they were able to fly this plane, would alter the engagement tactics of every Allied fighter against German planes for the duration of the war. Over 8 months, the Focke-Wulf 190 was a terror that plagued Allied airmen over the Channel. Its combat debut occurred over France in September 1941, and from that initial encounter, pilots recognized they were up against something exceptional. RAF squadron leader J.E. Johnson, later Britain's highest-scoring ace, met the FW-190 in early 1942 and narrowly escaped with his life. It surpassed our Spitfire Mark IVs in speed during level flight and in a dive, he later wrote. It could outroll us. Its armament was catastrophic. For the first time in the conflict, our fighters were completely overpowered. The data supported this fear. During the initial half of 1942, the RAF's fighter losses above France surged significantly. Veteran pilots, survivors of the Battle of Britain, were now being downed by a plane they could not equal. The FW-190 could escape pursuing Spitfires in a dive, best them in rolling maneuvers, and obliterate them using cannons firing 20mm explosive rounds. American airmen reaching Britain with their P-47 Thunderbolts received the cautions right away. Do not fight the FW-190 in a turning battle. Do not attempt to outroll it. Do not enter a diving contest. The catalog of prohibitions was extensive. The list of effective tactics was frighteningly brief. Intelligence services urgently required solutions. What rendered this plane so potent? What were its constraints? How could Allied aircraft defeat it? Yet obtaining these answers meant inspecting a real FW-190, and every specimen downed over Britain was too wrecked to yield its secrets. That is, until Armin Faber's disastrous error. Before we proceed, I am curious to learn where you are viewing this. Oberleutnant Armin Faber was no amateur airman. By age 21, he had achieved several victories and was regarded as a proficient pilot in Jagdgeschwader II, the distinguished Richthofen fighter group. On June 23, 1942, he was participating in a fighter sweep across the English Channel, flying protection for German bombers assaulting coastal objectives. The operation proceeded without issue until the journey back. At some point above the Channel, amid intense maneuvers while battling British fighters, Faber lost his bearings. Clouds concealed the shoreline. The location of the sun provided misleading directional information. When he descended through the cloud layer and spotted a green landscape with an airstrip beneath, his brain made an elementary yet fatal presumption. He believed he was over France, observing a Luftwaffe airfield. In reality, he was above Wales, seeing RAF Pembrey. This error appears implausible in retrospect, yet combat-induced disorientation occurred more frequently than armed forces acknowledged. Airmen flying at high velocity through cloud, executing high-G turns that impacted cerebral blood flow, occasionally lost their directional sense. Faber had executed a 180-degree turn amid the dogfight and was completely unaware of it. Upon landing and noticing the Spitfires, Faber tried to reignite his engine for takeoff. However, RAF service members were already encircling his plane. In a matter of minutes, he was captured, and British intelligence agents were inspecting the immaculate Focke-Wulf 190A3 parked on their airstrip. The initial response from RAF Command was near ecstatic. Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas, head of RAF Fighter Command, at once directed the plane be moved to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough for evaluation. Each feature of the aircraft needed to be recorded, gauged, and scrutinized. Inside of 2 days, the FW-190 was at Farnborough under examination by Britain's leading aeronautical engineers. Their discoveries clarified all that Allied airmen had been encountering in battle. The plane was a marvel of functional design. Whereas the Spitfire epitomized graceful aerodynamics, the FW-190 personified rugged utility. Its BMW 801 radial engine generated 1,700 horsepower against the 1,470 of the Spitfire Mark V. Yet, sheer power was not the complete picture. The FW-190's most lethal edge was its speed of roll. The aircraft could flip from one banked turn to the opposite quicker than any Allied plane. This apparently small trait was, in fact, groundbreaking in a dogfight. If a Spitfire attempted to tail an FW-190 during rolling actions, the British plane lagged behind. The German airman could switch direction, achieve a better angle, and aim his guns before the Allied pilot could respond. British test pilot Eric Brown operated the captured FW-190 widely and quickly grasped why Allied airmen were perishing. The ailerons were nimble and reactive at all velocities, he noted. One could maneuver this plane across the sky with minimal exertion. The Spitfire demanded strength and subtlety. The FW-190 reacted to intention. The superiority in armament was just as shocking. The FW-190A3 was armed with 4 20mm MG-151 cannons plus 2 7.92mm machine guns. A brief 2-second volley released more destructive force than a Spitfire Mark V could muster in 10 seconds of shooting. Furthermore, the guns were set in the wings near the fuselage, forming a dense grouping of fire that was lethal at typical engagement distances. Its diving capability clarified how FW-190s reliably evaded pursuing Spitfires. The German plane's greater mass and smoother aerodynamic profile allowed it to outdive any aircraft the RAF had. Airmen who attempted to chase an FW-190 into a sharp dive observed powerlessly as the German plane left them behind. However, the evaluations also uncovered flaws. It was here that the intelligence data turned into strategic gold for the Allies. The FW-190's radial engine, though potent, experienced cooling issues at great heights. Exceeding 20,000 feet, the plane's capabilities dropped significantly. The engine labored in the rarefied atmosphere, and airmen noted power reduction and overheating problems. Conversely, the Spitfire's Merlin engine, built for high-altitude flight, truly operated more effectively as it climbed higher. The significant mass that rendered the FW-190 an excellent dive bomber also made it less agile during extended turning battles. The plane could outroll a Spitfire, yet it could not outturn it in a protracted fight. Should an Allied pilot manage to draw an FW-190 into a continuous horizontal turning contest, the odds changed. Most importantly, U.S. engineers found that the FW-190's controls grew exceptionally stiff at high velocities. In a dive surpassing 400 miles per hour, the airman required considerable force to level out. This produced a window of vulnerability. If an Allied plane could follow an FW-190 through the start of the dive and engage it during the recovery, while the German pilot wrestled with his own controls, an attack was possible. British intelligence promptly started circulating tactical memos to RAF units, but they also took an action that would be vital for the air war's result. They asked American test pilots to Farnborough to operate the captured FW-190. In August 1942, pilots from the U.S. Army Air Force reached Farnborough to inspect Germany's hidden weapon. These airmen would go back to American training centers with information that would spare hundreds of American lives. Major Cass Ho, among the initial American pilots to fly the seized FW-190, submitted a thorough report that was sent to all fighter units getting ready to ship to Europe. His evaluation was direct and tactical. The FW-190 will defeat any Allied fighter under 20,000 feet if the German pilot is competent, Ho stated. Our edge is altitude. Above 25,000 feet, our P-47s and subsequent Spitfire models have the advantage. Compel them to fly high, and we prevail. Allow them to control the low-altitude fight, and we perish. This one item of information radically altered American fighter strategy in Europe. As P-47 Thunderbolt squadrons commenced operations in 1943, their doctrine stressed high-altitude engagements. Bomber escorts operated at their ceiling. Fighter patrols flew above 25,000 feet when feasible. If German planes tried to attack, American pilots would ascend, compelling the FW-190s to pursue them into the thin atmosphere where their engines faltered. The seized FW-190 affected American aircraft design as well. Engineers at Wright Field analyzed the roll rate superiority and started altering P-47 and P-51 ailerons to enhance responsiveness. The FW-190's armament layout shaped American thought on weapons grouping. The very cockpit arrangement, which German engineers had streamlined for battle effectiveness, had an impact on American fighter development. Yet, maybe the most vital learning was realizing the FW-190 was not unbeatable. It was a superior plane with particular strengths and vulnerabilities that could be leveraged. Allied airmen, previously mentally daunted by the 190's standing, now possessed solid data on how to combat it and succeed. By the end of 1943, the tactical landscape had changed markedly. American P-47s and P-51s were battling FW-190s at high altitudes, where Allied planes had the upper hand. RAF Spitfire Mark 9s, with improved Merlin engines, could equal the FW-190's capabilities through most altitude bands. Airmen on both sides knew they were operating distinct aircraft, each suited for different circumstances. The kill statistics started tilting toward the Allies. FW-190 casualties mounted as American and British airmen leveraged the information acquired from Faber's seized plane. German airmen observed that Allied planes were not repeating the tactical blunders that afforded the FW-190 its initial supremacy. Oberleutnant Joseph Pips Priller, a top-scoring FW-190 ace, remarked in late 1943 that American pilots had obviously researched the aircraft. They understand not to pursue us in rolling scissors. They push us high where our engines strain. They have learned, he noted in his combat log. The seized FW-190 stayed at Farnborough for the war's duration, acting as a baseline plane for assessing new German models as they emerged. When the FW-190 D9 Dora, featuring its inline engine, debuted in late 1944, Allied intelligence quickly contrasted it with Faber's captured plane, grasping how German engineers had tackled the original's high-altitude shortcomings. Following the war, aviation historians computed the effect of Faber's error. The information gleaned from inspecting the undamaged FW-190 was disseminated to thousands of Allied airmen via tactical memos, training movies, and live demonstration flights. This knowledge shaped aircraft design, tactical strategy, and operational schemes across several air forces. Captain Eric Brown, who operated more captured hostile planes than any other Allied pilot, would later state, "Faber's navigational mistake provided us the Rosetta Stone to decipher German fighter philosophy." Each tactical benefit the FU-190 held was recorded, and every flaw was leveraged. That one plane likely preserved more Allied lives than any other intelligence victory of the war. The irony was quite clear to German intelligence upon discovering what transpired. A Luftwaffe officer noted, "We dedicated months attempting to seize a Spitfire Mark 9 undamaged to analyze its upgrades. The British faced no such effort. We handed our finest fighter straight to them." Armin Faber passed the rest of the conflict in a Canadian prisoner of war camp. He endured the war, went back to Germany, and resided there until 1976. Luftwaffe files indicate he was first held accountable for the aircraft's loss, though subsequent evaluations recognized that combat disorientation could afflict any airman. The true puzzle was why German intelligence presumed the British would never acquire an undamaged FW-190. The tale of Faber's seized fighter imparts a vital moral regarding the character of technological superiority in conflict. Germany's Focke-Wulf 1-90 marked a significant advancement in fighter concepts upon its 1941 debut. For almost 12 months, it bested Allied planes via better performance and novel engineering. Yet that edge vanished instantly once Allied engineers could inspect the machine itself. No plane is unbeatable. All designs entail concessions and compromises. The FW-190's low-level supremacy was paid for with high-level capability. Its superb roll rate was accompanied by stiff, high-velocity controls. Its potent weaponry increased mass, which diminished agility. As soon as Allied airmen grasped these trade-offs, they could leverage them. Presently, the FW-190 is recalled as among the premier fighter designs of the Second World War. Air museums exhibit remaining samples as marvels of German engineering. Yet the plane's renown is intrinsically linked to the intelligence breakthrough that exposed its mysteries. In the intricate arithmetic of wartime superiority, a single pilot's brief confusion above the English Channel transformed Germany's hidden weapon into a known quantity. The FW-190 that Armin Faber mistakenly handed to Britain evolved into the aircraft that instructed the Allies on achieving victory. This lesson reverberates throughout military chronicles. Advanced technology is important. Advanced intelligence is more important. And occasionally the most significant triumphs arise not from calamitous assaults, but from basic errors that provide your adversary precisely what they have been urgently hunting for. The FW-190 might have stayed an enigma, an unbeatable foe that kept killing Allied airmen as much through mental dominance as through technical prowess. Conversely, it turned into an educational instrument that every Allied airman analyzed, absorbed lessons from, and eventually overcame. A single navigational mistake, one landed plane, one intelligence boon that altered the aerial conflict over Europe. That is the way America obtained Germany's secret fighter. And that is the way one error tilted the equilibrium of power in the heavens.